GM, thank you for tuning in to this YouTube interview with Michael Williams, Head of Product at Unstoppable Domains. Michael, I'm glad you're on the show today because we have some really exciting product news to talk through, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Good to be here.
Thanks, man. You're like your head's down every day building in Web3, and I think that perspective you have is so unique because most of us are collectors or investors and not necessarily builders in this space. So I just want to pick your brain along like how you're thinking about this product and what it means for people in the Unstoppable community and really just the broader Web3 ecosystem as a whole. But we're here to talk about Humanity Check, and this is just launching today. So if you're watching this today, it's a new product feature coming out from Unstoppable. And if you're tuning in, just know that this has been out and is continually getting iterated on. But can you break down what is Humanity Check? And then we'll kind of dive into what that means for your digital identity.
Sure. So Humanity Check really simply is a way for people to verify their online identity without revealing information about themselves to the applications and the services that they use. We can, of course, get into much more detail.
Gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like it's important that we're able to verify who we are when we're interacting in this Web3 world and not just simply remain anonymous.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anonymity is a hugely important thing in Web3, of course. I mean, it's kind of deeply rooted in the ethos of the space. And anonymity is fantastic for so many different reasons, but it also comes with trade-offs. I mean, the biggest of these trade-offs is obvious. Like if we are interacting with each other online, we don't know who we're interacting with. We don't know if we're having a conversation with 10 people, if 9 of them are actually the same person. Basically, there are a lot of issues with the level of anonymity that we have right now, and a lot of human coordination problems that can only really be solved with a guarantee that you are dealing with a person. The challenge is in finding a way to solve these problems while still preserving anonymity, preserving people's privacy at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's start from the top, like from a conceptual level and work our way down, right? So can you explain what does it mean to own and manage your digital identity?
Sure. So I think about identity as being the kind of amalgamation of a few different things. And so there are facts, like what's my name, where do I live, these things which are very static and don't really change. There are relationships, like how I've interacted with other people, what kind of services I use, really the joins between these individual units across the online world. And then there's avatars, like how we present ourselves, how we present ourselves to the world. When you talk about managing an online identity, I think it's really a combination of those three things, like facts, relationships, and avatars. But ultimately, it all boils down to really storing data about yourself and plugging that data into other places. And of course, a key component of Web3, and unlike Web2, is giving people the ability to decide what data they store, how it's used, and kind of which applications have access to it.
I really like how you break down facts, relationships, and avatars. I just wrote that down. That's an interesting, like 3-pronged layout that I haven't thought about just yet. So taking that into account, how does login with Unstoppable help facilitate some of that identity verification and management?
Yeah, so login is a great feature that we've been building for a little while. I have a ton of plans for it. But really simply, it is a way to associate metadata with your online identity. Wallet-based authentication is great for authentication, but that's really all it is. It's just a handshake. It doesn't give you a way to pass data through with authentication. And that's where login with Unstoppable comes in. So it's this, it enables this hybrid model where we have a fully decentralized, fully self-controlled front door for what your identity is, your domain. And then a mix of decentralized and centralized resources on the back end that you can kind of bring data from those sources and pass it through your domain to the applications that you use. I saw someone on Twitter a while ago talking about how Web 2 is you interacting with websites and Web 3 is websites interacting with you. And I think that's really what login starts to enable.
Wow. I almost need to think about that a little bit more. Websites interacting with you. So could you give a good example of a website requesting to interact with you, and then maybe also include how adding this element of humanity check could improve that relationship and interaction?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think social media is a great one. And this doesn't exist yet, but I know a number of teams, Aave, for example, that are working towards building this. I mean, imagine if instead of your collection of followers and followees living somewhere on Twitter servers, like what if that was just tied to your online identity? And what if whatever feature, whatever application you started to use that had a social component, what if that application could request a copy of your social graph to therefore like pre-populate the user experience and make it really seamless so that you can find your friends in this new service? I mean, that's the kind of thing that we think is how the internet should work, where data should be controlled by the people who actually produce that data instead of the various companies that tap into it. Does that answer your question? Can I go into more detail?
Yeah, it does. I think we're gonna come back to that kind of example maybe a couple times throughout more of this conversation. So that's okay. So yeah, I just described a couple of the features that all of our members can get when you have an unstoppable domain, right? This connections to some of your social profiles, the ability to verify that, the ability to add your crypto addresses so that you can have one easy to remember name to type into wallets when you're sending crypto payments, right? Now, how does Humanity Check really work in terms of the feature and benefits that it's providing to people with a UD domain?
Yeah, so let me start really high level and then I'll zoom in a little bit. So Humanity Check is a way for applications to verify a person's humanity. It is really useful for them because it gives applications a way to dedupe their users, to prevent bot fraud, to enable more trustworthy voting. It gives them a way to not only solve problems, but also enable new experiences, things like personalized rewards, more UX personalization, things like reputation that's transferable across ecosystems. There are a lot of things that Humanity Check enables. But that doesn't answer your question about how it works. So for how it works, it's actually very simple. It should be super familiar for anyone that has done an ID verification flow of some kind online in the last 10 or 15 years. But there are some key differences. And I'll preface this by saying that Humanity Check is 100% opt-in. It is not required. And once Humanity Check is done, people have control. They have control, absolute control over that data. And furthermore, after you set it up, it's also fully anonymous. So let me just put that in the foreground as I talk through how it actually works. So the way it works is when you're on a website, you log in with your domain. That application can then request a copy of your Humanity Check. If you are a first-time user, you'll be asked to take a picture of your ID and a little selfie. That information goes straight to a company called Persona, which is our partner for ID verification for this. Persona is used by BlockFi and Square and Gusto and a bunch of other names that you've heard of to do ID verification. They're accepted in something like 200 countries, 20-something languages. So your information goes to Persona. Persona scans that, makes sure that it is real, that it's legit, and it bypasses, that information bypasses the application and unstoppable domains entirely. It goes straight to Persona direct. Once it passes that check, Persona basically gives us a thumbs up and says like, yep, this person is a unique person. They assign you a random number and they pass that information back to the app. So at no point does any kind of PII, personally identifiable information, go to the application or to unstoppable domains. The only thing that we or the application can see is like, yep, this person is a human and we are going to refer to them as human number 12.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I think it's really interesting how you're calling out the fact that the apps don't get access to that personal information Unstoppable Domains doesn't get access to that personal information. It's simply creating this verification that you are someone and that you are unique, right? Because when we have all these different wallets or NFT domains logging and interacting with these decentralized applications in the future, it seems like it's going to be important to have that fact check to make sure like you are unique. Is that correct? And I'm just trying to think through this a little bit more because in my day-to-day life in Web2, I'm not like filling out humanity check information at every website, right? So why is this something that's important in Web3 and like a feature that's we're seeing pop up now as some of these applications start getting more mature?
Yeah, I mean, let's take NFT projects, for example. I mean, there is a huge issue with NFT projects in trying to make sure that the launches are fair. That if you have 100,000 people who are all waiting in line for the same 10,000 NFTs, I mean, you need to have a fair way of actually making sure that people get access to that project. So you don't end up with these situations where you have whales coming in and buying out 50, 100, 1,000 of the 10,000, squatting on them and then making millions of bucks. Like we want these communities to be as open as possible. And that requires some sort of verification that the person I'm talking to is a person, not a bot farm with 10,000 Ethereum addresses that they can just plug into all these projects. And that's what Humanity Check enables. So it is a privacy protecting way to prove that you are a human.
That's really interesting because almost to create a more equitable and inclusive Web3 that really falls onto the ideals of fair participation and open participation to everybody, we do need to add in that identity layer versus just keeping everything 100% anonymous. So yeah, the way that you describe that right there definitely shed some light onto the topic for me. Now, could you also give maybe besides the ability to get access to like an NFT drop, how else would a partner be thinking about requesting this information, and why would someone choose to give that or not? Because you said that this is completely opt-in. So
Yeah.
as a partner, can you just give another example? I want this to be super clear, and I'm learning too, what they would ask for the humanity check for, and why I might consider opting out.
Yeah. So I think there are actually a ton of use cases for this, and I frankly don't know all of them because I think more will emerge. It boils down to basically giving applications confidence that they are dealing with an individual. So anything from reducing the surface area for things like Sybil attacks to making voting in DAOs more equitable. So it's not based on the number of tokens you hold or the number of addresses or anything. It's literally just based on like one vote per person. Things like I mentioned, registration for allow lists for various projects. Even stuff like reducing comment spam without revealing your identity. I mean, Facebook famously made this policy change for requiring a real name on comments, which all of the privacy people were up in arms about. A feature like Humanity Check would allow that sort of moderation of comments without requiring that people give away their actual identity information to the applications that they use. And then the biggest one, I think, or at least one of the biggest ones that will come out of this is also just giveaways or promotions. If I'm a new application trying to bootstrap some DeFi protocol, maybe I want to give the first 10,000 people that show up free trades for life. I could do that.
Yeah.
It's ultimately up to the applications how they want to use this tool.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I guess I do like the fact that the user really still is in control here. Something that I heard just talking to people internally at Unstoppable is that, and maybe it was you that was saying this, it was right now our identity information is actually stored in Web2, is stored across hundreds, maybe even thousands of different websites, because all the different companies right now have to self-manage our data, right? And so my user data is probably sitting on hundreds of servers, all because it's Web 2 is siloed from, Twitter is keeping their user data separate from Facebook, etc. And now that source of truth, that identity, is in my hands, and I'm choosing who that's given out to, versus Web 2 social media companies or e-commerce brands collecting my data and selling it off between people. So I do like the fact that I'm in control and I get to choose, do I give it to you? Do I want that promotion? Do I want access to that whitelist? Because I still have to choose if I'm following your requirements, right? But if I don't want to, then I can say, okay, you know what? I'm going to retain my data, and that's just my personal choice. So the choice really is getting put back into the user's hands with this.
Yeah, and like you said, you can always opt out. But if you do opt in, I think it's important to remember that you're not sharing your data with this application. Literally, the only thing you are sharing is yes, I am verified human number 12. Mm-hmm. So the barrier to proving your identity is actually way lower, because I don't know about you, but I wouldn't trust some random NFT project with my driver's license photo. It seems kind of ridiculous. But a company like Persona that has done ID verification for years and years and does it with some of the biggest companies in the world, I'm okay with that trade-off. So
yeah. So humanity check is definitely different than KYC, and that's probably an important clarification to make.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't expect people. We don't think that people will want to share that level of information with all of the applications that they use. And we think that 95% of the benefit of KYC, unless you are a financial institution that needs it for regulatory reasons, 95% of the benefit you can get with just a verified humanity check. Another thing that I don't think I've mentioned so far is that you only have to do this once, and it's reusable. So you share your information, and then you are assigned this number, and then every login, it's as simple as just clicking a button to pass that number through to the application you use.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that you just have to do it once, and I'm glad we clarified that it's different from KYC. I think this is just something that people are wrapping their heads around, because we're not thinking about identity like this in our day in, day out. And it's such an important distinction, and it's also kind of technical. This humanity check is simply verifying you are a human and that you are unique compared to everyone else trying to participate in whatever decentralized application that we're all trying to participate in. So very important distinction. Can you talk us through how humanity check fits in with our broader future roadmap at Unstoppable?
Sure. I mean, we have seen this use case emerge of identity, especially last year with the craze of NFTs and people trying to represent themselves in different ways online. And that's a wave that we want to support. So a lot of the features that we are thinking about, a lot of the things that we are building are in some way tied to giving people more tools to represent their online identities, giving them ways to pass that data through, back to those facts, those relationships, and those avatars that I mentioned earlier. So we see things like identity check, things like login itself, things like our domain profiles, all stitching together into this really rich tapestry of information that people can control themselves and then plug into the various places that they use online. So there are a lot of features that we have coming up soon that are in that same vein.
Do you want to talk specifically about badging or rewards?
I will definitely talk about rewards. We think this is a use case where I mentioned it earlier, where if I'm a DeFi protocol trying to bootstrap my first 10,000 users, there's probably some sort of reward mechanic that would make sense there. Generally or traditionally, that's been through having a better APY. But if you are not a DeFi protocol, you probably still want to have a mechanism to do rewarding for your users. And we think that things like humanity check could enable that. And it's something that we'll definitely consider adding smoother support to through Unstoppable as well.
Awesome. Well, I think that we covered humanity check. We did this is the first time we're talking about it. I think you and me will be back to talk about this more as we start seeing applications start integrating it and we start seeing our member base integrating it, right? So maybe this is just humanity check part 1 with Josh and Michael. But is there anything else you want to cover?
No, I think that's great. If anyone watching this has questions that haven't been fully answered, I'm sure my socials will be somewhere in the notes for this episode, but you can
Yeah.
find me on Twitter at MVWI. Drop me a note. Happy to talk.
Sweet. Yeah. Connect with Michael on Twitter. We'll be sure to include Twitter handles down below, and they are on the screen right now under our names. So I'd also like to end this with just letting everyone know if participating in this future world of identity in Web3 is something you're interested in, step one is acquiring a unstoppable NFT domain. Set up your account, verify your identity via our domain profiles workflow, where I mentioned personally, I've got my crypto addresses associated, I've got my socials associated, so I can say that this truly is my Twitter, my Discord, etc. And once Humanity Check is out, I'll be going through that workflow as well. And then in the future, you can integrate when you're interacting with applications that have integrated our login functionality. You may be able to win rewards and receive really unique promotions for going through this Humanity Check system. So, Michael, thanks so much. I appreciate everybody listening to this interview.